So we were talking in the second Mishnah about someone who died and he left when he died, there were various competing claims on his estate. There was a wife, there were heirs, there were creditors, and he had some liquid assets, a deposit or a loan that he'd made to others. I mean, a deposit in the possession of the others or a loan he'd made to others. And there's a dispute between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva as to who this is given to, because the halacha at the time of the Mishnah was that movable assets, and calf is considered a movable asset, was not mortgageable. So those assets couldn't be formally, let's say, charged to any of those interests. And by the way, that's not the halacha now. Since the time of the Gaonim, the halacha has been that, creditors, or for that matter, a wife, could take possession of movable assets. And maybe that reflects a situation in which assets were becoming more movable. So in the time of the Mishnah, the only really fixed asset was land, right? In the Mishnah or in Palestine. So there is land ownership. Maybe the shift in halacha in the time of the Gaonim, reflects a society where Jews owned, they own movable things, or they own money, or they own securities, but they didn't have so much land ownership. So the halacha has changed. Anyway, Rabbi Tarfon says it's to be given to the one who needs it most, and Rabbi Akiva says, no, we follow strict legal priority. There's no mercy in law. We follow strict legal priority, and we give it to the inheritors because they can take it without an oath. That's essentially where we left the situation in the second Mishnah. And the third Mishnah of the 9th chapter is going to be a mirror image. Of course, we've seen this before in the Mishnah of Ketubot. Sometimes the Mishnah goes through seemingly identical cases. And this is to do with produce that was detached from the ground. So he doesn't leave money. Hiniach perot lushin min hakarka. He's died and he's left produce that's detached from the ground, i.e. it's already been harvested. And we've said before, by the way, that produce that's been harvested is effectively like money. In fact, when we measure income in the time of the Mishnah, we actually measure it in terms of grain, right? We say a certain volume of grain is your income for the week or for the month. So produce is money. So it's movable. So it can't be mortgaged, at least in the time of the Mishnah. So what are we going to do? He left produce that was detached from the ground. Kol hakodem bahen zacha. Whoever seizes it first acquired it. And I think this is not so, as the Mishnah is not trying to trigger a free-for-all here, but I think it's just saying that, gosh, we can't formally mortgage that property. So someone who's in possession of it has a claim on it, and someone else obviously can make another claim to take it away from them. But in principle, the person that's holding that property has first claim. Now, of course, that is not to say that, and maybe this is coming back to the question of the free-for-all, it's not to say that a creditor can just go and take everything. And the Mishnah continues, Zachat isha yoter al ketubata. So maybe the wife took it, but she ends up with more property than the value of her ketubah. Uval chov yoter al chovo. Or maybe a creditor took it, but he ends up with more than the value of his loan. In other words, the value of his claim. Ve'hamutar Rabbi Tarfon omer yinatznu l'choshel shebahem. So if there's a leftover, the creditor or the wife has taken more assets than she needs, what happens to it? Rabbi Tarfon says we give the leftover to whoever's under the greatest disadvantage. In other words, the person that needs it most. And Rabbi Akiva, just as in the previous Mishnah, is going to disagree. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ein murachamin badin. Rabbi Akiva says, we don't have mercy in law. Law is about rules and it's about facts. It's not about mercy. We don't care who's under the most disadvantage. Ein murachamin badin. We don't have mercy in law. Ela yitan nu le yorshav. We're going to give the property to the heirs, to the inheritors. Now, obviously, the creditor and the wife are going to have a claim on the heirs. So we're not doing the wife out of her ketubot. But he's going to explain, because all the others require an oath. And the heirs don't need an oath. The heirs can take possession without an oath. Whereas a creditor or a wife the creditor needs to swear an oath that there was the loan, and the wife needs to swear an oath that she hasn't already received her ketubah, i.e., that she's not getting her money twice. And the halakha goes according to Rabbi Akiva, that we don't have mercy in law. And the Mishnah then goes on just to investigate other situations related to oaths. So we're going to segue. We're going to sort of shift focus slightly, but again, following the theme of the oath. And in order to see where we're going to shift, we need to briefly visit a Mishnah in Shavuot, in the Mishnah of oaths. Actually, we're going to look at the first half of this Mishnah. All of these can be made to take an oath, but without any claim. So far, we've been thinking about a woman who wants to claim her ketubah, or a creditor who wants to claim the repayment of a loan. And clearly, they have a claim, right? The woman has a claim on her ketubah, and the lender has a claim on his loan. So they have to swear an oath. Essentially, they have to swear an oath. But some people can be made to swear an oath without any claim existing at all. And this is the list. These can be made to take an oath without any claim. Hashutafin, ve'arisin, partners, tenants. So these are people that might be suspected perhaps of misusing property that doesn't belong to them. So maybe they have to take an oath to certify that they haven't misused the property. Ve'ha'apotropin, guardians. So if you appoint someone as a guardian over your property, you might want them to take an oath. And now we're going to get into marriage. And a wife who transacts business in the house. So she's in charge of the business affairs. It feels like the husband can make her take an oath that she hasn't misused his property. Really interesting, but that sort of gives you a sense as to kind of economic and marital relationships in the time of the Mishnah. Uven Habayit, and the son of the house. Amarlo ma'ata to'aneni. If he said to him, what do you claim of me? I.e., why are you making me take this? The other party can just say, Rutsoni shetishavali. I just want you to swear to me. And he has to swear. Chaya. In other words, these kinds of relationships where there is a trust, there's an ongoing obligation sometimes to take an oath. That's the halakha in the Mishnah of Shavuot. And now if we go back to Ketubot, we've learned that Rabbi Akiva says there's no mercy in law. We give the residue property from this deceased person to the heirs because the heirs don't need to take an oath. And the Mishnah goes on to say, Moshiv ishto chanvanit, someone who sets up his wife as a shopkeeper. Really interesting fact about, again, economic life in the time of the Mishnah. So the wife might be the shopkeeper. Hamoshiv ishto chanvanit, or shemina apotropos. Greek word. A Greek word, it means a steward, really. I've translated here as guardian. It's really a steward. Someone who set up his wife as a shopkeeper. or appointed her as a steward. That means a steward over his property. He can impose on her an oath whenever he wants. That's in line with the Mishnah in Shavuot. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, afilu al pilka ve'al isata. Rabbi Eliezer said, even in respect of her spindle and her dough. And I mean, we know before, by the way, Rabbi Eliezer doesn't like women. He doesn't think they're reliable. And he keeps on going back, by the way, to women's spindles. He says the only wisdom of a woman is in her spindle. Maybe he objects to this idea that the woman is the guardian of the steward of the husband's property, or the shopkeeper running the husband's business. Maybe this sort of runs the wrong way for him sometimes, because he said, gosh, he can make her swear an oath even about, basically cheating the husband out of dough or out of wool, which she's spinning. And the Bartanura concludes, and he's quoting from the Rambam, Ein halacha ka Rabbi Eliezer. The halacha does not go according to Rabbi Eliezer.